Let's get surreal with Art 101 and me, Mr. Burgher. It's kind of strange, you know. I get in my vehicle, throw on the old video capture machine and let it roll. See what comes out of my wild mind. It's not completely unlike the Surrealists and how they would come up with some of their ideas. It's not completely the same, but it's, again, not completely different. You know, it wasn't too long ago here, my wife and I took a little trip out to Florida. Now here we are in St. Petersburg, Florida, at the Salvador Dalí Museum. Salvador Dalí was a fascinating figure, and we're gonna go inside and talk a little bit about this fella and his life, along with Hank. The most famous Surrealist then and now will remain to be Salvador Dalí. Although most people think of him as this very strange Spanish Surrealist painter. I mean, Salvador Dalí, he was known for the mustache. You know, he was the mustache guy. He was also working as a filmmaker, sculptor, graphic artist, and designer. One of my favorite quotes of his was, "At the age of 6, I wanted to be a cook. At 7, I wanted to be Napoleon, and my ambitions have grown steadily ever since." Over the years, his personality would cause lots of controversy. He would do lots of strange and unusual things. Many people would be unsettled by some of the antics that he would pull.
Am I alone in finding you somewhat difficult to follow in terms of what your theories are? Do people often misunderstand you or find you hard to...
No, but this is absolutely normal.
It's interesting, but
because myself worked in my surrealism for 14 years, and today no understand nothing of my work.
No one understands your work today?
No, a lot of it is absolutely legitimate. A lot of people also no understand. Because if myself don't understand, the other will understand less.
He was a unforgiving self-promoter.
So that really you feel that surrealism, having started when you were with it as very gay, has now sunk into melancholy and despair, and that you alone remain as a true representative of it.
Absolutely true.
You know, he's kind of an exceptional surrealist. One of those guys that's really known for these dreamlike settings and really becoming the kind of the figurehead of surrealism. Salvador Dalí was born as the son of a very prestigious notary in a very small town in Spain. Like most growing up in Spain, he admired the artworks of Diego Velázquez and considered him to be the greatest artist ever to come out of the country. And there are a lot of artworks that we need to look at to really get an idea of his early life and into his professional career. His first art teacher was a known Impressionist artist. Eventually, he would move on to the Royal Academy of Art in Madrid, Spain. He was twice expelled and never took any final examinations. In his opinion, he was more qualified than those that would examine him. In 1929, Salvador Dalí would move to Paris, France. There he met several budding artists including Pablo Picasso and Juan Miró. There is a very fine Salvador Dalí museum inside of Paris that I would encourage anyone to go take a look at. At any rate, the leader of the Surrealists was André Breton, and Dalí became affiliated with the group, but would be eventually shunned by Breton for being a fascist and a self-promoter who only wanted money. Salvador Dalí would alter his approach to surrealism to be based upon the theories of Dr. Sigmund Freud. The idea of reoccurring dreams as a primary subject matter would become thematic in his works. The burning giraffes, melting watches were reoccurring themes of his dreams. This guy really used a sophisticated set of symbols to try to get his story across of what he was thinking and doing and believing at various times or in various paintings, and he kind of threw it together like a big soup or stew of ideas that, you know, it worked, but it didn't work all at the same time. And that's kind of a neat thing. Dalí was a very dedicated Christian and put many religious symbols in his artworks. But those are not the only symbols that Salvador Dalí uses in his artwork. Other examples include the eggs. Basically, the egg is a prenatal image that is a symbol of both hope and love. If Dalí had a power animal, it would most certainly be the snail. His use of eggs, lobsters, and yes, the snail, with their hard exterior and very soft, squishy interior, were mentally mind-boggling to Dalí. He believed that Sigmund Freud's head was in the perfect shape of a snail shell. And so, like the egg, the snail becomes a symbol of both love and hope. He would oftentimes depict elephants with spider legs. Oftentimes, these elephants would be carrying objects on their backs. This is a symbol of strength and power. Some of the theories of Sigmund Freud are injected into the paintings of Salvador Dalí, which is exactly why the grasshopper is oftentimes represented. The grasshopper is a symbol of fear. Salvador Dalí had a huge phobia of grasshoppers, and so he painted them in order to get rid of his fear of them. He so much believes in the therapy of interacting with what you fear that at the Salvador Dalí Museum they sell grasshopper toys for children. That's right. An animal that is oftentimes seen in Dalí's paintings are ants. These are symbols of death, decay, and immense sexual drive. If we look at the paintings that are post-1950, we will oftentimes find images of butterflies. Of course, this is an obvious symbol of transformation, but it's also a symbol of individuality, where colors and light and the individual patterns of the butterfly and the uniqueness of the butterfly are all acceptable within nature. He would also oftentimes use drawers inside of things. Sometimes the drawers were in actual furniture, sometimes they were coming out of people, and so forth. Oftentimes, these drawers are slightly opened. The drawers are a place where human sin and complexities are stored. One of Dalí's biggest fears was the fear of impotency. He uses crutches as a symbol of erectile dysfunction. So in a sense, the crutches are a symbol of our handicaps and weaknesses. But there are other symbols that he uses in terms of sexual inadequacies, including sometimes representing himself as a female. When he was a young boy, he thought of himself as being female. Sexually, he was very androgynous, and he would paint himself as such. When I was a high school student, just as a young man, I would oftentimes look at Salvador Dalí's work as an influence, and I remember in 1989 when Salvador Dalí died, and kind of wow. He's asleep snoring. I've bored the boy, he's snoring here.
Start out from the beginning.
He would develop a dream sequence for Alfred Hitchcock's film Spellbound in 1945 and was planning on creating a full-length animated feature with Walt Disney, although that never happened. Dalí wrote a novel, Hidden Faces, as well as several autobiographies. His most recognized painting that he had created was Persistence of Memory, that he painted in 1931. This would include his typical barren landscape with the symbol of the melting watches because of his theories of time not existing. The water, which was a symbol based on his youth, where he thought that water was like a sheet that he could just crawl underneath. The crutch and the ants. Art historians and scholars feel that he did nothing beyond this one great work, and he climaxed in the 1930s and simply became a self-promoter until his death in January of 1998. I personally feel that he is original and his technical abilities are incredible. One of my absolute favorites that he ever created was his Last Supper painting. The apostles all have their heads down in reverence to Jesus, who is at the head of the table, and everything about it just really captures my attention. As I have already mentioned, in 1929, Salvador Dalí was living in Paris, and this is where he met Gala. Gala was a Russian immigrant and 10 years older than Dalí. She was already married but chose to leave her husband for Dalí. His fame was rising and she wanted to go right along with him. By most accounts, she was an opportunist who looked at Dalí as a way to climb up the ranks of fame, and she exploited him for his wealth and his fame and his power. Gala to art was what Yoko Ono was to the Beatles. She was both glue and dynamite. During World War II, the couple would escape to the United States and lived in Virginia, California, and New York. In 1948, Salvador Dalí would move back to Europe, dividing his time between Spain and Paris. Salvador Dalí has the distinction of being the only living artist to ever have 2 museums exclusively dedicated to their artworks: the Dalí Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the Dalí Museum in Spain. In a house fire in 1984, he was very severely burned, and he was becoming more and more a frail old man. And at the end of his life, he lived in the tower in the museum in Spain, where he would die of heart failure, and he is now interned in a crypt in that very museum. You know, what do I know? I color for a living. As I was beginning my art career, Salvador Dalí came to me in a dream. I remember it very vividly. I was walking down the street in Spain, and I was summoned up to his bedroom. I went up the flights of stairs and entered the doorway, where I was looking in and out simultaneously. To my left was the city fading into the ocean, and at my right was Salvador Dalí himself lying in a bed. There was a canopy over that bed with a mesh that I could kind of see through, and I walked around to the side of the bed. I was on his right, and I looked at him, and he began to speak to me. He said, "Mr. Burgher, you have the power and the skills to be one of the greatest artists of all time. But there's just one thing you've got to do. There's just one thing that's going to make the difference between your success and your failure." And I leaned closer. What was that one thing? And he told me. And that's the one thing I can't remember. I don't know if that story's going to make the final cut. Thanks for clicking on Art 101 with me, Mr. Burgher, coming to you from St. Petersburg, Florida, and the Salvador Dalí Museum.